Welcome to the Five Phenomenon Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Hayes, and coming out today, writer-director A.J. Edwards. His new film, Age Out. It stars Ty Sheridan, Imogen Poots, Jeffrey Wright, and a pretty unrecognizable Brett Butler. I highly recommend it. But first up, what interesting stuff I watched this week. If you want to follow my film diary, it's on Letterboxd, and my username is Bodamander, Bodamander. I had a good week, as Decembers usually are, because people or film viewers like me are trying to compete with all the top 10 lists coming out, just so we can say we saw what others have said it good, and trying to compete with film critics in New York and LA, even though we're a small market. I have a chance next week to go see Marriage Story in a theater, and someone would recommend distinctly seeing it. It was shot on film. And it appeared on Netflix Friday morning, and I think Noah Baumbach's one of the best particularly writer director. Well, he's a great director too, just filmmaker in general. He's really making some incisive stuff right now. So I just watched it right away. And true to the rants I've made already on here, I started Friday morning, got a bunch of phone calls, paused a bunch. But even still, it blew me away. One of my movies of the year. There's one particular scene in the middle that is just devastatingly acted. There's also, I gotta be upfront, I have a weird thing as a child of divorce. I have a fondness for movies about marital breakups. So, I'm a really big fan of like the season 4 finale of The Sopranos, or continuing, spoiler alerts, certain scenes at the end of Richard Linklater's Before Midnight, even though further spoiler, it's not about a marriage breaking up, but there's that tension there. So, amongst the other things I saw this week, the oddest, most notable is I finally got around to seeing Louis C.K.'s movie "I Love You, Daddy," the movie that he had to buy back from Orchard after that New York Times expose about him masturbating in front of a set of women without their consent. And I had read reviews about it. I saw the synopsis. I figured I knew what I was getting into, but I guess I went in just because in the back of my head, Louis C.K. at the time, I think he got canceled so fast, and at the time he still was a really distinct filmmaking voice. His show in particular, before all this happened, people really a lot of the great chops with his like his David Lynch episode. I just really love his Doug Stanhope episode. I've raved about it. And Horace and Pete's got some really, really, the writing in that in particular. Like no one was writing anything like that on film. Like maybe in certain plays, but not on filmmaking. And so I want to see this. If you so, not to get too far into the plot, but the basic gists are his daughter's turning 18, and he's a rich TV producer and writer, and she's starting to she goes to a party with an analog for Roman Polanski and Woody Allen, and they start up a potential relationship. And Lucy Kay's always had a lot of influence from Woody Allen, and but this, like I said, I knew what I was getting into, but it's so weirdly confessional before he got caught, but it's almost like a dare to catch him, and to like, it is mind-boggling. There was a joke in his last stand-up special about his daughter starting to. He just was assuming that she's going to have the life she's going to have with her sexual identity, and he figures she's going to have a ton of bad sex, and so he makes a joke about she's going to have just a bunch of bad dicks in her face, is what he says, and he then starts hitting his head with the mic and says dick, 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 and illustrating. It's a funny gag in the bad choice words, but in the movie there's a very unfunny, serious version of this joke, or maybe not specifically this joke, but talking about why there's an arbitrary line for when it's okay for his daughter to have sex, and it is jaw-dropping, just some of the stuff in this movie. And I say this as I do hope that like the key to a lot of these Me Too figures that have gotten financially hurt by their scandals, I hope he eventually has a sufficient apology. My personal hope is that he'd have a stand-up special that would illuminate this behavior. So far, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. But anyway, oh, I didn't even mention this movie. The style of this movie is in black and white. It's done 30s Hollywood style. It reminded me a lot of that movie Nothing Lasts Forever, the SNL movie from the mid 80s that never got released that had Bill Murray in it. Um, so there's this like weird artifice in it, and like a lot of Louis episodes, maybe it just didn't click. But then on top of the content, I'm telling, yeah, bizarre. So AJ Edwards is on the show today, and as he alludes in the interview, he and I have known each other for a long time, and we worked together for a long time. And one of the exciting things I hope comes across in this is for those of you who knew me, say between like 2008 and 2013, and noticed that I disappeared into my work for a long time, you get a glimpse of just the joyous day-to-day conversations we used to have. AJ's just one of my favorite people, and we he's one of those old friends that we don't live in the same town. We don't talk as much as we used to, and but getting on the phone, it's a well. To be honest, whenever you get him on the phone, he always wants just to know about you. It's hard to get him to talk about himself. So it was a great pleasure to have him in a format where I just got to ask him questions. I towards the end of this, I asked him about the reaction to Better Angels, which, for the most part, the reviews were just kind of. We talk about it in the talk, but it's just they went to the shorthand of his mentor, Terrence Malick, who he'd worked with for a long time, and we talk about him in the interview and their work together briefly. The hard part to describe to other people who've seen, I was lucky enough to witness a lot of the formation of a lot of some of Terrence Malick's films in the last few years, and I know how much he relied on AJ, and how much AJ's voice is in these movies, even though clearly, indisputably, these movies are in Terrence Malick's voice, and it's a voice that he worked a long time to get to, and it's a voice that distinct is, not encouraged in the film industry, and it's a marvel that he's able to do that. But it's also AJ's contribution to it, and I can't recommend watching Age Out enough, just because he's starting to he's just got a sharp filmmaking mind, just very incisive understanding of film language, and like a lot of great artists, he also just has every once in a while you'll be talking to him, and he has a thought or an opinion out of left field that you just never considered. And I think as the start of it, he's going to have a long career, and he's only going to get better and better. And Age Out, especially, is already indication of this. And I can't recommend seeing the movie enough, and getting excited about his next movie too. So, without further ado, AJ Edwards.
What number am I? You've done 3?
3. You'd be number 3. Number 2 just went up today.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You've already been getting feedback?
No, the only feedback I got was in the first episode. I bitched about Martin Scorsese.
What about him?
I just said that there's certain things about The Irishman and him being kind of the king of cinema, or not king of cinema, but I don't know what the right term would use. Patron saint of current cinema is. Sometimes it puts an undue expectation on his movies itself, and we forget that he's not perfect. And I think I think auteurism is kind of going away a little, and he's now the embodiment of it.
You're saying that people are praising it too much, that there's no critical eye to it?
No, I've seen a little more critical eye of it, but I was really annoyed at the way he called out Marvel, specifically Marvel. And one, I felt like it was. I didn't mention this on the thing, but I thought it was very deliberately like timed for the release of the movie. They were trying to create controversy, and also I think his target is wrong, and
Did you read the Brody or the Matt Zoller Zeitz responses
I don't think so.
to him saying that? The Marvel comments, they were both.
What do you say?
Well, I mean, the both of them are kind of long. It'd be a lot to go into, but I
Richard,
bet that it'd be a nice
I bet Brody had an interesting
addendum to what
response.
what you were saying.
I mean, I saw some people speak up for Scorsese that made more sense than Scorsese himself, but I was really annoyed at the essay he wrote. The fact that he cited Samuel Fuller and Hitchcock in there as evidence that that was art, but Marvel's not. Like, well, okay, that's literally the exact same argument critics used against both of them in the 50s and the 60s.
Man, I want to hear the response to what people. I mean, what people think of you laying it down on your last podcast.
I didn't really go that hard. I'm also in this weird spot where I'm trying to like I'm not. I haven't been a film critic for a while or done anything public like that. And there's this venture quote I heard by the way of Aaron Sorkin that you should never really insult, tear down movies because all movies are hard to make. And so I'm trying to keep a positive vibe on here, but
Sure.
and or realistic, and or all movies are like. There's also a really great Tarantino thing that don't hate a movie. Every bad movie or movie you had a bad enjoyment is something interesting you can learn about from it. So
What optimistic quotes.
yeah, yeah, it's hard to keep mindful, but so what are you up to right now? What are you working on?
You mean tonight immediately or in the grand scheme of things?
Both. Why not?
Are
Both.
we even recording?
We've been recording for like
Oh,
for a
okay.
few minutes actually.
Um, in the grand scheme of things, I've just been writing a lot and then editing, trying to get next projects going, and enjoying New York City all the while.
Was is Age Out playing in New York?
It played in New Jersey.
We're in New Jersey.
I don't even know. It was held over in I think Austin,
Where
in
was it playing in
L.A.
Austin?
I think it was Austin. Yeah, the theaters where it's been popping up have been random to me. They don't match up with the list I was given by the distributor,
Huh.
so I didn't even know it was going to be in New Jersey. And then the morning of, I saw that it was there,
I
and it
saw.
was even under the wrong title. It was under Friday's Child, not the new one, which is
Really?
doubly crazy.
Which we should explain. That's where it played at South by. Under was the title when it played at South by,
That's right. Yeah,
and
all of development, casting, shooting, festival, making the festival rounds. It was always called Friday's Child, and then
it played
to
Deauville
get
too.
to get a facelift after the long festival run and it taking so long to finally hit the public through theaters, they thought change the title and freshen things up.
How long was the whole process from end to shoot to getting into theater?
We wrapped shooting in February 2016, and then the movie just came out last week. So that's that's a long time.
Well, I guess that's the you live firsthand. That's the life of indie filmmakers, where especially in the market as it is right now, where it's getting harder and harder to find distributors to put out some of this stuff, or there's less and less home runs every year. It feels like.
Well, this was a different situation. We actually had plenty of distribution offers right out of South by. There was internal problems that prevented the movie from being sold.
Can you speak to those, or do you not want to?
No. Yeah.
Very
But I
succinct.
mean,
Very succinct.
by my silence, you can imagine how litigious and ugly they got.
Oh.
And so, but the look of it is, oh, I'm sorry, the movie didn't sell. That's too bad.
Uh,
But it wasn't that at all. It was that the offers that were there were
oh.
turned down.
Well, let's rewind then. I've never actually gotten a beat on where you're from because I know you're from all around. I mean, sometimes I think of it as you're from the Bay Area. You were based out of San Antonio for a long time. You have a long Virginia base. Where exactly are you from?
I usually say Texas for a short answer, but yes, I was born in the Bay Area, My folks are still in Northern California, but I'm pretty much a Texan as far as living for so long.
Okay.
San Antonio, Austin,
Was San Antonio
and
where were you born at, or where you were lived your early years at?
yeah, middle school, high school, and then college and after were Austin.
Okay, was elementary school in the Bay Area before?
Yes, exactly. Specifically Walnut Creek. Yeah. So kind of near Cole Slinker.
Okay. Do you remember the theaters around there?
Yes, there was a theater. I don't know if it was called the Dome Theater. That's what my family called it because it was a dome, a very like mid-century looking suburban movie palace, and it was beautiful. It was destroyed a couple years ago, which was heartbreaking.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, it was right there in Walnut Creek.
Did you was that where you was seeing your first movies?
Yes. Uh, yeah, I think the first movie I was ever taken to as a baby was Back to the Future. But the
R-
first movie that I remember in a theater is like it's either Batman or Naked Gun.
Naked Gun?
Yes, it might have been a double feature. We also had a drive-in theater
Oh,
near us, which was incredible.
do
Part of
you,
the suburban, you can make a fort in the back and have a double feature.
did you like bring food or stuff too? One of our
Oh, for
previous
sure.
guests was talking about that.
Oh yeah, I love bring fast food or Subway sandwiches and yeah, what was it? Batman, Dick Tracy, uh, all sorts of fun stuff. It was incredible.
Have you been to
It's
a?
so foreign now, the idea of a drive-in movie.
That was my next question. Have you been to a drive-in lately?
No, have you?
There's one near here. I mean,
Oh, that's great.
well, in Austin there was the Blue Light. I had gone to one of those shows there, but I don't know if Brooklyn or any place would have one. It seemed like something. I mean, cars being what they are in New York,
There's got to be something funky like that near here, but if there is, I'm not aware of it.
where they like come around, give you stuff in mason jars.
Right. Or the Austin when they did the Jaws screenings on the water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those were.
Yeah.
I actually never went to one of those. I don't know why. Um, so do you who took you to the movies when you were first going?
Both parents are movie lovers, and you would see movies in good times and in bad.
Okay.
So if everyone wasn't feeling too happy, get out and go to the movies. If it was Friday night and we were all feeling great, go to the movies.
Was it a
The
weekly
same with
thing?
and holidays too. That's always Thanksgiving tradition, Christmas tradition.
What
Birthdays are marked by movies.
really?
So yeah,
Do you remember a movie to birthday pretty well, or is it one of those like you have
Jackie
to?
and I were just talking about that the other night. I
Jackie,
was over for
your
this.
wife, Jackie.
Yeah, my wife. I'm sorry. I was talking about seeing in middle school Eyes Wide Shut on my birthday, which took some convincing to be allowed to see that movie.
I imagine.
But that was a birthday movie. Um, what else? I think Batman Returns might have been, and then as far as holiday movies, the one that stands out the most at the Dome Theater in Walnut Creek was seeing Hook.
Hook.
I remember that.
Well, you're a big Spielberg fan, so would that have been one of those ones that first got into you, Spielberg wise at least?
Yes, but when I saw Hook, I was only 5, I think, and I didn't know what a director was or anything like that. I just loved the movie and the experience. The first time I was aware of a director that job existed, that movies were made and not just suddenly popping up on a silver screen magically, was Jurassic Park.
So it was
Uh,
Spielberg still.
it was Spielberg, and I saw a 60 minutes special as a kid, and it was a little 15-minute thing about how that movie was made, and the director's name was Steven Spielberg. And I walked out to my parents and I said, Dad, the man that made Jurassic Park is named Steven Spielberg.
What were your parents' film tastes like?
Hmm. My both love action and adventure. They love uh, the Godfather films, Rocky films, comedies like slapstick, whether it's Steve Martin or uh, yeah, Martin short films, John Hughes. uh, independent films. You know, that was not a term tossed around a lot, but I remember we had a theater. This is now Texas, but
Okay.
outside of the Woodlands, somewhere near Houston, a town called Tomball. I remember going to be taken to a film called Goodwill Hunting, and it was playing at like the independent theater, or as it was known, like the smaller theater. So
And you would have gone with
everybody
your
wanted to
parents on
go see
that.
that movie, and that was there. But so I think you know the parents' taste was varied.
Did you, what were your friends' film taste like? And did you go see movies with friends a lot?
Oh yeah, and I could bicycle to the movies, which is great. Uh, so sometimes we would go save up money and go in, or sometimes you could, friend hold the door open for you, sneak in.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, but always see movies, especially during summertime.
okay. Well, when did, was it any time
There's a New York sound for
that
you.
is a New York sound? When, in relation to the, seeing the Spielberg, Jurassic Park behind the scenes thing, did you start to get the bug? When did you first start to, did you pick up like a video camera? Was it something you just started studying more film?
Yeah, I used to love using the big VHS camera, the one that like goes on your shoulder.
Yeah.
I forget what those are called, but those big guys. And then I switched to my mom got me a high 8 camera, and I remember shooting both stop motion films
What kind of
made
stop
with
motion
clay fig.
films?
Well, I first saw Tim Burton's Frankenweenie and that short film he made, Vincent. Frankenweenie's not stop motion, but there's both. Vincent is that first one that he made, and so I was so inspired by that, and then Wallace and Gromit shorts and Nick Parks' Creature Comforts, and so we would shoot. My friends and I, my brother and I would shoot stop motion with figures we made, or even like things, us moving around the house strangely, going upstairs, going down. You look at it now and it looks like early cinema experiments. The kind of crazy, wacky stuff you see in the early 1900s.
Was it very, were the stories you were leaning towards, were they jumping into fantastical from that by just nature of doing something stop motion, or?
Oh yeah, fantastical stuff, horror stuff. I love horror movies, so we would do uh, Edgar Allan Poe short films, or we'd do science fiction films that we made up, like with aliens and spaceships and costumes. Yeah, it was, and cutting all in camera, so
Yeah, I
no
remember
no
cutting in
VCR,
camera.
VCR, or no nonlinear editing yet.
You know what's crazy is my nephew. He came over the other day, and I gave him a bunch of toys. He's really into the Spawn character, and I found I had a bunch of old Spawn figures, and I gave them to him, and he showed me over Thanksgiving. He's done this a few times, but he's been making stop motion animation stuff on his phone with those
Oh, that's so
figures.
great.
Yeah, it was really cool. What I was really giving him credit for was he innately understood what an over-the-shoulder shot was doing, and he was like it was weird. He was actually following axis pretty well too. I was giving him credit for that.
That's so great. Yeah, I've seen friends and family friends do like Lego stop motion videos as well. Some of them are incredible, like you say, with how quickly young people get the grammar,
Yeah,
wide shot, over the shoulder,
the
close-ups, reaction shots.
the grammar in particular. It seems like every generation understands visual grammar and how to communicate stories visually much more than the previous generation, just by sheer volume of how much they ingest in their eyes.
Oh yeah, yeah, I believe it.
Do you remember like a first date movie you saw?
Yes. Let me think.
So you moved
Yeah,
to
I think,
you would have gone to Texas around middle school. This would be in Texas probably?
yeah, but I was just about to say my first dates, I wouldn't really count as middle school. Not we weren't driving yet and
Mm.
going
Well,
to movies and groups and all that. So I would say the first date would probably be with Jackie, seeing The Majestic.
oh wow. So you wouldn't count your parents driving you there or in the groups?
But I guess it wasn't one on one. It was more like a group. I mean, there would be, you know, uh, girls that people liked and or and all that, but it wasn't. yeah, I wouldn't call it a date. If I were to say the first one, I meant I wanted to go see the Royal Tenenbaums and assumed that it was out, but of course, being in San Antonio, it wasn't.
Mm.
And so instead, we settled on the Majestic, which opened that same day, which I
What
did not care for.
what did Jackie think?
Oh, I bet she probably wasn't that big a fan either. We were both so excited to go see. You know what? Let's see, how old was I? I was 15 or 16, and we were both so excited to see it, as was everyone. And then, yeah, it didn't come out. But you know what it's like. Both you and
Yeah.
I grew up in cities that didn't get, what is it called, first run or the immediate showing, so you have to
Yeah,
wait.
the platform strategy. So wait, your first date was with your current wife?
Exactly.
Wow. Um,
Yeah, I always say I'm like Bono. I think he married his high school sweetheart.
okay. When did you first starting to branch off from what would have been mainstream cinema?
Even before high school, I remember that um, my brother got a job at a video store when I was in middle school and he was in high school, and we could just raid everything. There was a foreign section and an independent section. I think it was Hollywood Video, which
Mm,
is
we got a Hollywood video.
disappeared forever ago.
We,
But
well,
yeah, I remember seeing.
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I remember seeing Eight and a Half, and that was
Wow.
so. I was like 12 years old, and it was something I'd read about, and I was so excited to see it, and then it was just like all the classic kind of textbook foreign films, The Seventh Seal or La Strada, um, like early Kurosawa, and then around that same time the AFI list came out in 1998, and I was just watching TV one night, and I remember it randomly came on, and there was this special going, "Here are the 100 greatest American films," and I had all these actors and directors talking about it, and it was so fun. But then with that list and working, I mean, my brother working at the video store, he and I were just seeing everything we could.
What was his taste like? Same?
Uh,
Were they
on the
influential on
subject
you?
of Age Out, he introduced me to Gus Van Sant,
Oh,
Drugstore Cowboy and My Own Private Idaho. Um, those movies were really dear to him, and um, yeah, what else? He loved Singing in the Rain. That was a movie he would watch all the time, and yeah, he had a. I mean, his taste was it was varied as well.
okay. Well, what was your early film reading? I mean, because you always struck me as someone just. We always talked about how similar a lot of our um, teenage years in film fandom seem to be. That's
Yeah,
what
oh yeah, yeah, they are
a
alike.
lot of mix of high and low brow between the two of us.
It's still to this day.
Yeah.
I remember reading, there was a Jonathan Rosenbaum book called, I think, like The Film 100, and he just wrote about 100 people throughout the history of cinema that he thought was important, and that book was very educational. It had, both completely populist, famous people, as well as people like L.W. Dixon or Billy Bitzer, surprise, names that I had no idea who they were, and from the silent era. And what else was important? Oh, is it Joseph McBride? Is that the
Yeah.
biography?
The I
Yeah.
was he I didn't I give you an Orson Welles book of his?
Yes, exactly. He wrote the Orson Welles one, and then he wrote the Spielberg one. And
Um,
that Spielberg one I read, when I was in middle school. And then there's coincidentally, we had to do a book report on someone in middle school, and it wasn't the McBride one that you gave me later for Orson
sure.
Welles, but
Yeah. Well, that came out much
it's
later.
was it Simon?
Callow.
That could be right. Yeah, it was this
We talking about Orson Welles?
it was an Orson Welles biography. Yeah,
Yeah. No.
Simon Callow. So I had
I
to do a book
think.
report on him and
I
then dress
think.
up as him.
Didn't he write a book that had a lot of involvement with Orson Welles' daughter?
Yeah, I may have. I mean, I haven't looked at the book since. I think there are better biographies that, like the one you gave me. I haven't ever gone back to that one from middle school, but it was.
I feel like I
Well, I
have
mean,
it in my library somewhere. I knew it was at our local library, so that was the one I always went to. But um, Do you remember when you discovered Kubrick?
Yes, it would have been, I think my brother and I sneaking Clockwork Orange,
Oh,
or
wow.
even no, or probably The Shining
Okay.
when we were kids, sneaking that at Halloween. But when I was watching that, then I didn't know who he was. When I became aware of who he was, it was with Clockwork Orange.
Okay. Okay. I for Halloween I got to show my nephew The Shining for the first time, and that was something. That was it's
What's the reaction?
He liked it. I mean, he the coolest thing recently with him was he for a period in October he was coming over Saturday nights, and we were watching some horror movies, and The Thing is now one of his favorite movies of all time. He had the greatest reactions to it. He after the first scene where the dog starts to transform, he's turned to me and he said, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." Then at the end of the movie, he immediately wanted to watch behind the scenes, and he said something along the lines of, "I'm just amazed that human beings can create stuff like this," and meaning the creature design. And he wanted to know how it was made.
Gosh, gotta
It.
send John Carpenter a letter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, uh, part of the reason I'm doing these podcasts is I'm trying to get to the core of just like reminding people, and I keep asking people childhood stories, but why they like movies, and I don't want the like the Pollyanna cliche stuff. Like I'm really trying to elicit what the feelings got out of them from people to specific movies, because my other thesis, which I've given to you a lot of times, is that the big movies are the movies you saw when you were like between 13 and maybe 22. Like just really hit you, but you were just starting to develop your own independence too, kind of.
I
So
completely agree with that theory, and it's also the same with music.
sure, sure. Should we talk about music? Because you have some really interesting use of needle drops in your movies, particularly in Age Out.
That's nice to hear. Yeah, I'm sure proud of the soundtrack, both original and licensed. It's a nice mix, and we're trying to get the soundtrack out right now.
Who did the
Uh,
original music?
Colin Stetson, the saxophone instrumentalist.
Okay, how'd you hook up with him?
I had listened to his music. I was working with Khalil Joseph, and we were working on the Arcade Fire film, and Colin Stetson would be in and out of that picture.
Okay.
And I just wrote him to say how much I loved his music, and so we had a little correspondence then. And then I started licensing his music for Age Out when we were in post production, and he said, that's great that you're licensing the music, but if you want original stuff too, I'd be glad to compose it. And
Oh,
then we, struck up a collaboration from there.
okay. So, going back to, I do want to dive into both Better Angels and Age Out, but I kind of want to keep on a narrative stream. So,
Sure.
how did you get to Virginia? When was Virginia in the equation?
Just moving a lot from my parents, different, they'd be transferred and things like that. So I had graduated high school, then headed to Richmond, Virginia, and was going to school off and on. Then just taking classes at the junior college whenever I had the wherewithal for that.
What were you going to school
Um,
for?
what was I going to school for?
Yeah,
Just the bare minimum, really. I wasn't degree bound or
you weren't taking film classes or anything.
no, no, no. This was just, yeah, I was just doing core curriculum and you know going through the motions like a cat taking a bath. Uh, the and then started working on The New World. That movie came to town and
Well,
saw it
isn't
advertised on local morning news,
that was
and so
the
that started to interrupt class even more so.
that was the story I was going to prompt you to tell, that you actually started working.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you can't really talk about my beginning of school classes in Virginia without mentioning what I mean. Yeah, that's the reason it started to just eat in more and more. I mean, I was already drifting away from school and choosing to work instead, and I was writing a lot, and I had these crazy ideas that I was going to go make a movie for I don't know $5,000 or $10,000, and So that was at, like age 21 or 20, 21. I was already, I wasn't focused on finishing school. So
Well, briefly going back to Age Out was, I mean, that script was older than Better Angels, wasn't it?
yes, not the script, but the idea and there was like a treatment. It was a little different town in Texas. Uh, Instead of it being a young woman that is wronged, and they sort of begin this odd romance. The woman was a little bit older, so there's greater age disparity. But the main idea of forgiveness, this terrible accidental crime, rooting it in Crime and Punishment, all that was, yeah, I had thought of it back in high school.
I remember your tagline was "Crime and Punishment in Texas." That
Yeah.
was also one of those taglines you got quickly annoyed with. It seemed like
Strangely, it was coincidentally also from 60 Minutes. Everything
Spielberg.
comes from 60 Minutes.
You accidentally stole Spielberg's idea.
Yeah, I just saw this special on this kid aging out of
Oh no, you were okay. You really was
foster
from 60
care, and I
Minutes.
thought, oh man, that'd be a great beginning for a character. What's he gonna do? Where's he gonna go? Who's gonna find him for better or for worse? But it was just a little 15-minute clip about this one guy that they followed. I saw it in high school and I wrote it down. I thought it'd make a good beginning, and then I held on to it for, I don't know, what is that, 15, 18 years or something.
So, are there a lot of scripts from this time that you were, or at least ideas that you were writing down that you still have? Is that something you want to make, or just that might form into something? Or did
They
you
they
have any?
definitely they form into something else, like you said. It's nothing concrete, but there are definitely echoes of things I was interested in that roll over into other ideas and other scripts.
Okay,
I've
so
never thought about that. That's interesting.
yeah, I mean, because I mean, in general, it's a broad question because obviously you're going to accumulate in the creative life. You're going to come back to old ideas you've had forever that are going to organically change over time. But I didn't know if there was any specific, if you were starting to write it on, if there was anything still came out fully formed that you've still used or.
Well, I won't use it now because our friend Henry Butash sort of used it, but I'd been really interested in around that time, early 20s, in Death in Venice, which
Oh,
of course has been made into a movie before, and it's really great. But I thought, oh, you could update it to contemporary times. It doesn't have to be a composer; it could be something else. The sexes of the characters could even be changed, the locale, everything.
mm.
But I
Was
thought,
was it Visconti
such
who
a
did
simple story,
the main
you
version?
could achieve it with few resources.
Yeah. That, so the things you saw an ad off TV, was this a casting ad for, or were they, or for looking
I
for
think it was
extras?
cast and crew. It was just some corny thing talking about how Hollywood's coming to Richmond, Virginia. It was the kind of thing you can imagine, and then I called and got a meeting set up, and that was it.
Okay, so were you like a set PA?
Yes, yeah, I was a set PA. I was the only guy that I showed up in a suit to my interview. Just because my parents insisted, well, you should dress up, Tuck, you should look good. And so I was sitting there on the bench with the other candidates looking ridiculous. Yeah, wearing a suit in order to, you know, guard the parking lot and log footage or something.
Do you remember who the interview was with?
It was with Trish Hoffman, who was the executive producer.
Okay,
It was her and Sarah Green, the producer.
okay.
Um, yeah, it was unnecessarily formal now looking back on it, which is so funny.
Did they react to the suit properly?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everyone just thought it was hilarious and ridiculous, and they were all, they were kind and
You're a dapper man. You'll be a dapper man on set.
exactly. And when I walked out of there, not knowing even what job I was interviewing for, I just wanted to, like, I mean, like everybody there, you just want to be part of it, and and then you're looking around in the hallways to see what actors are walking by, or if you see, the main director himself, and it was all just so exciting.
So how long were you were you on the entire shoot?
I wasn't really on the shoot. I was just working with my friend who made the making of, or he became my friend. He made the making of documentary that's on the DVD of the New World.
What
His
was
name's Austin Lynch,
was there a
and so I
trans?
was there just to help him with whatever he needed.
Is that what you started out as? Whenever you?
Exactly. I mean, I
Oh,
would drive people to set and then base camp, off and on if they were shorthanded, or I'd do office runs, whatever. But then the main thing that I always go back to was helping Austin with whatever he was shooting.
Did you edit on the behind the scenes?
No, no, he was the editor.
Okay. Well, how did you
And
just?
that's a nice mysterious thing to talk about. He has both this, hour and a half long chronicle of the New World with all this amazing behind the scenes footage that he shot, and then director Michael Almereyda shot it, and it was completely rejected.
Oh,
Not because of its quality, but because of, oh, Christian Bale doesn't like to be filmed, and then the director Terry Malick doesn't want to be filmed. Um, New Line was super excited about it, especially after the Magnolia making of and the Lord of the Rings making of.
yeah, the Magnolia one in particular. Just rewatched that a month and a half ago. That's one of the best behind the scenes, and
Yeah, and
it's
this
so
this was
intimate.
just in that vein of like covering everything, but then it got reduced a whole bunch, and now it only covers a, a small aspect of production, although an important one. But he also was even chronicling part of editing, which was neat. What's funny
Really,
though
how did
is
he do that?
he flew to Texas and then went and shot our office where we were cutting. So there's Hank Corwin and Sar Klein and Marco Shikawa and uh, the whole it was just so great. You don't see making ofs usually chronicle
Yeah,
post production. What's funny though is
Sorry, go ahead.
a year or two later, he then goes and does the same thing on There Will Be Blood, and that one is also rejected. So there's this unseen 90-minute making of There Will Be Blood that has Daniel Day-Lewis getting into character, but then like halfway through that movie, the same thing happened where he went, you know what, I don't want to be filmed anymore, and then the director Paul Thomas Anderson goes, you know what, I don't want to be filmed either. So but they have these two making ofs that have never seen the light of day, even though they're amazing
Did
and
you
chronicle such an important thing.
did you ever see? He never finished it, but speaking of our friend Khalil Joseph, he got about 26 minutes cut of his behind the scenes that he was working on for To the Wonder. Did you ever see any of that?
Yes, yeah,
It was
I don't know if I
good.
saw a whole 26, but I saw his start of it, whether it was 15 minutes or 26 minutes, and it was great, because he was talking to everybody on set, and they were all telling their 2 cents when they're tired at the end of the day, and then he was chronicling everyone living in the same hotel, and it was the only making over. It felt like what production feels like.
Yeah,
It wasn't just people sitting with a pretty backdrop behind them going, "Well, my agent gave me the script, and I knew I had to do it."
right.
It wasn't that kind of making of. It actually felt like the rhythm of production.
Yeah, I was really unfortunate that Khalil wasn't able to finish that for.
That has two unfortunate aspects. He had his ripped from him, and then on top of that, before him, Les Blank, the one of the greatest documentarians of all time, wrote a letter and said, "Hey, I'd love to chronicle the making of To the Wonder. I'm from Oklahoma," and then he was turned down by Papa Terry himself.
Oh,
And I remember saying, "You are insane.
I think I've.
You're preventing Les Blank from doing his work. You gotta tell him yes. He's a fellow countryman in Oklahoma there. He'd do an amazing job. Like they're gonna do this making of anyway. Instead of having it be terrible, have Les Blank do it." But of course, you know that's what happened. But man, that would have been because I think he died a year later.
Yeah, I remember when he was friends with
Courtney.
yeah, Courtney Stevens, who's been making some interesting stuff on her own lately. But they were mutual friends, and so I
Yeah, she
remember
always
that.
had really. I always loved hearing her stories about him. It sounded like they had a cool bond.
Yeah, yeah. You back to real briefly behind the scenes in editing because I remember when I was filmed for editing and I was just like, I don't know what to show you, man. We just sit in front of the screen, man. You make the bit. I constantly use this point when I'm pointing out to people like how misunderstood and bored people are with the editing process. The greatest documentary, making a documentary on film, or the most entertaining is Heart of Darkness. And do you want to?
I know what you're gonna tell.
Why don't you go ahead and say it?
Just that thing when yeah, it's a 80-minute or 2-hour film. I don't remember chronicling Brando going in and out of the part and suddenly wanting to back out, but then he shows up on set and Coppola trying to keep all the money together and trying to keep the crew safe and happy there in the jungle and all this stuff, and it's a great making of. And then they rap, principal photography, and then there's some kind of title card that says 2 years later, and it's them getting out of the limos
For the
at the
premiere. For the
premiere.
premiere, yeah.
Yeah, as if the little process called post production never, like 2 years later, boop, the movie magically arrived at the premiere. It just is so great, especially knowing that film,
Yeah. Which
which had
that
so many iterations, had so many challenges.
yeah.
It's great.
Has one of the most legendary post production processes, and everything you learn about it, they just modernize so it. Yeah, but
Walter Murch though does have another. He got uh his time in the sun in terms of those making ofs though, because he's on the that documentary that they make all film students watch called, I think it's The Edge, like
that sounds familiar. Is
it's
that
called like On the Edge, like some the Cutting Edge. It's called The Cutting Edge, and they're like covering him making Cold Mountain, and so you actually just sit there and he'll go, well, I think I'd like a close up here, and this is, but it's just you actually get to just sit with him for 5 minutes as he cuts Cold Mountain.
is that the one that has Cameron at the beginning where they're stuck trying to cut stuff out of Terminator 2, and he's just like, well, let's think outside the box, let's try a new experiment, and let's cut out every 12th frame, and
Yes,
they
that's
showed the
it.
footage of it, and yeah, it was a nice experiment. It was a nice stab. Yeah. Well, let's go back to New World. You were doing the behind the scenes. How did you get into the editing room on the movie itself?
I just told them that I had Austin roots. I could put myself up. I had generous friends that were there to let me stay with them, and uh, just wanted to help out in the office, and they needed the help, so
How long
there
was
I was.
how long was the editing process on that?
1 year.
That's, I mean, kind of.
It was a studio film. It was different than, Thin Red Line was also 1 year.
But
It
the
was
Terry's other
only
production.
after the New World that the post production schedule started to balloon. Although I realized the first two movies had long post production schedules and reshoots and all that. But um, yeah,
You were there for the entire year.
for the New World, yes.
Okay, and can you um, tell me what Terry told you after that was done? Didn't he send you with a list of books?
Oh yes, that. Yeah. Well, I was immediately. I didn't want to just go back to junior college and go back to just getting a job in retail or whatever I was gonna do. I wanted to keep up in uh, obviously movies, and I knew he was bound for his next one. So, I just said, my goodness, let me help in any way I can during this development process. He gave me a list of books, which I will not share. It'll completely change the course of the conversation.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But he would just say, here, we can read these together, and let's, talk. And then luckily I got to keep working with him. And that, I mean, that to say the least, that was the next 10 years.
Okay.
Um, and,
Do you want
and
to?
then, after having seen the New World production and all of post production, it was wonderful to then experience development, casting, camera tests, pre-production, financing, you know, uh, all the way to the next film, Tree of Life.
Okay. Do you so was there a long gap in between while you were or did you jump on?
Yes, it was about, let's see here, 3 years between the movies. And what was great about that is I was with Nick Gonda, who produced Tree of Life along with a couple of other producers, but then he produced Better Angels, and it was during that gap between New World and Tree of Life that he and I started talking about Better Angels because
Mm,
Nick wanted to produce. Um,
Better
and
Angels was
so
the
I would,
first one you talked to him about?
hmm yeah, started sharing the idea with him and talking to Terry about it as well, and reading books together about young Lincoln, and then uh, we'd have meet kind of, what do you call them, table readings together
Yeah.
uh, as it advanced into script form. And then Nick was so helpful in the casting, uh, all his ideas of how to make it happen. So that's what was essential. Not only working on New World and Tree of Life, but it was during the interim, during the development of Tree of Life, that it was able to work on Better Angels and get that into a strong place.
I remember one time telling you about how this podcast is based out of Evansville, Indiana, and it's very close to where Lincoln lived in Indiana. And I was talking about how I was into obsessed with Lincoln when I was in kindergarten. You kind of matter of fact were like, yeah, every kid was obsessed with Lincoln. Do you remember what your when your childhood Lincoln obsession was like, or when you first really started doing a deep dive on him?
Deep dive wasn't until I was an adult, but I think I was like some kids that have the morbid fascination with his assassination.
Mm,
Um,
right.
that was, I think, the first time. And my sons are the same. They'll always want to hear, the
Six Simba
the night in D.C. when he's killed. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, but that was when it began for me, and um, but then reading Carl Sandburg's book and Lincoln's three brief autobiographies themselves, where he's sort of elliptical about certain details that make you curious about what he was leaving out.
Hmm.
Uh, and then reading David Herbert Donald's
Was was
biography. Well,
was
yeah,
it a
like
lot about his relationship with his dad, which was pretty big part of the subject of the movie? Was that what he's leaving out?
exactly. Yeah, uh, he was not very forthcoming about that, but his law partner William Herndon uh, spoke about it. After Lincoln's death, about some of their candid conversations they'd have working together about his dad, and then certain details just that anyone can put together, like the fact that he didn't attend his dad's funeral, is sort of curious. Although there are some historians that say, oh, well, there wasn't easy access by train, so he couldn't have attended. But there's also people saying remarks like, once his dad died, Lincoln felt that he had already said goodbye to him and that he didn't need to go to the funeral, that his dad, in a way, was already dead. Um,
Well, didn't he come back for his mom's funeral, or he came back early
his
before?
biological mom died when he was a boy, and then his stepmom outlived him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
There was something like a final visit. Anyway,
there
um,
was a final visit. Yeah, he went and visited his uh, stepmom, Sarah, before he went off to be inaugurated for the
uh,
inauguration. That's when he said bye to her.
okay,
Last time he saw her.
okay. Y- do you want to talk much about the casting process? Because you would have met. I mean, you guys what you drove all over Texas for the Tree of Life casting process, and it would have been where you met Ty, right? Ty Sheridan.
Exactly. Yeah. So Nick, after hearing There Will Be Blood, they that casting team got permission to go into schools, sorry, a school, and then they could look around and kind of quietly select people that they thought were appropriate for the film, and then inform the teachers or their chaperone, whoever was leading them around the school, who they thought was right, and then that chaperone or school official would send the child home with a letter that they were to give to their parents, not knowing the content of the letter. Then the parents could decide whether they wanted to be a part of this strange film invitation or not. Um,
Well, how long
on
was
There Will
the
Be Blood, they only did it at one school, I believe. They
how?
went into first school, they found the kid, and he was cast.
Okay. Well, how
And then
long and wide was your process?
on There Will Be Blood, on the Tree of Life, we did it every day for a year and a half, and so we looked at tens of thousands of kids, uh, and have all these tapes and DVDs and profiles and photos and stuff still somewhere in some warehouse. But that's
Right,
probably actually not good to share.
right next to the ark somewhere.
But I mean, the film took so long to get made that we actually did cast the film once with a couple boys that would be the O'Brien kids, and then the movie took another year or so to get made, and then they hit puberty, and so we recast it.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yes, yeah. But because we circled back with those kids and said, "Oh, hey, let's check in with them," and one of their voices had already dropped and were changing, and the boyishness was gone. That you could see them starting to get bigger.
Like the Edward Furlong
Um,
thing on Terminator 2, where
what's that?
he had to loop most of his lines because he was
Yeah,
puberty hit.
the voice that cracks and all that.
Yeah.
That's so good in that movie, though.
Yeah. So was you were second unit director on Tree of Life? Was that your first time directing a camera unit of people, or had you done anything else like short film wise? Or
No, that was it. I mean, I other than playing around with friends, that would have been the first, and the first with film.
oh
That was what's
wow,
also strange is, it's a very different experience to pick up a film camera than a video camera. The weight, the unwieldiness of it, uh, even the way that it captures imagery it's just so foreign to someone who's never worked with it.
were
And
you?
now it will always be. I mean, it's now gone. So
Well, your eye is one of your most. You have such a distinct way of looking at it. A lot of it's kind of. I always looked at it as the accumulation of your influences. But were you doing a lot of photography at the time, or did you just dive in and just shoot for the film and just take direction from the director and whatnot?
yeah, I mean, I loved experimenting with cameras when I was a kid, but no, I was not in any way near some savant or a tech. I didn't have a technical mind. I wasn't developing on my own or experimenting like a real photographer. So yeah, I guess it was really diving in or being thrown in because it was a job that I didn't even ask for. It just,
Wow.
I remember the day it was just told to me that I would be the second unit director because for the 3 years between New World and Tree of Life, I had been doing all these camera tests and trying to learn how to. I had been given a list of learning how to shoot certain things, and then, you know, by the end of that list of 600, 700 different setups or things to shoot, I realized at the end that that had been the education of how to
Yeah.
try to shoot what the movie needed. So it was
So
almost like all the 3 years in between was like a camera warm up, and then on day one, I was better able to do it.
wow. So did you you so after the shoot was done, you dived in the editing room there, right? Or was there any overlap? Were you editing a little while you were shooting?
No, I was just getting. I remember getting notes from Chris Rodan on like, "Step it up, buddy," which was so true. You go back and look at the early days of, for using a film camera for the first time, it just does not pass muster. And so he was staying on it and going, "This is not equaling first unit, obviously," and I needed to work harder. So there was just a lot of lost sleep and uh, sweating blood over trying to get better.
Okay. So when did you get married before the shoot or during or had it already the shoot already happened?
But got married before the shoot.
Okay. When was your first child born? It was during post, wasn't it?
Yeah, in 2008. Uh, so we shot. Principal photography started in March of '08, and then my son was born in June.
Okay. So I always had post ending at August 2010. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So were you already where was Better Angels at that period?
Gosh, that's a great question. I remember.
It was like another year before you shot, wasn't it?
Uh-huh. Well, a little longer than that, but yeah, I remember I was trying to find a cameraman to work with, and cast was going in and out like they do. You get one person in place, and then you go grab for another, and then one person backs out either because they're going through a messy divorce or someone got pregnant and then they're gonna be pregnant so they can't do the movie, or someone else takes another movie and then ditches yours. So on that movie, we were the casting was like musical chairs until finally it all perfectly sunk up.
Well, what were the first off, while editing with long hours, how were your viewing habits then? Was it you randomly got to go out to one night? Were you watching stuff after you got home from the editing room, or
You mean during casting?
into Tree going into? Because once Tree of Life ended, did you had a little more time to watch some stuff? I assume. Is that true?
Yeah, I would just work at night. You'd finish doing whatever post production or pre production duties are required by the Tree of Life or To the Wonder, and then whatever time I had early in the morning or late at night, that was spent writing, going through casting tapes.
Did you jump right into doing um, going to Oklahoma for To the Wonder
Yeah,
second
the
unit?
day that I wrapped Tree of Life, pencils up, and then that weekend drove up to Oklahoma. I remember by myself, just drove straight up and started pre-production on that before even anyone else was there.
Okay. Let's do a bit of a macro view in total with Terry from whenever you first worked on New World to some whatever the most recent work was. How long have you worked for him,
Um,
including off and on?
yeah, I guess it's been like 12 or 13 years. It's getting confusing now just because the last few years I've just sort of popped in. It hasn't been long term.
Okay.
It'll be like I go and work for a month or something or 2 months. It's not permanent.
Okay. So on Better Angels, you guys shot in upstate New York,
Yes, which is strange to you and everyone in your state right now because it
right?
doesn't look like New York. But
But you pointed out that it did. I thought it was a foliage thing or something. You told me.
well, it was if you had to frame out the vistas of upstate New York because that doesn't look anything like southern Indiana. So we were framing out the exact thing that most people go up there for and revel at.
Yeah.
But yeah, we wanted the kind of rolling terrain of these hardwood forests and high canopies, old growth trees. Um, and so, for financial reasons, we ended up shooting in New York and we shot at the Mohonk Mountain Preserve, built the cabin right there, and we're shooting in the fall of 2012.
What were the movies you were watching going into it, or in general, movies did you watch going in for to get ready for the film?
The Elephant Man, The Miracle Worker, Pather Panchali, The Wild Child.
Just specifically black and white movies,
I
or
realize, well,
child
those are all black and white, but I guess it's also movies about teaching and learning and
and
kind of,
children?
yeah, children and unexpected love and friendships forming. Um, so those were, yeah, I was watching those and trying to think what else. Yeah.
Do you, when you watch a movie for, are you looking for tech inspiration? Are you looking for technique? Are you looking for, something thematic inspiration?
You're saying before any movie or specifically before production?
I think specifically for production, because it would be pretty desolate to say I watch all movies just to,
Okay, good. Well, that's what I was hoping you were asking it for.
yeah.
Before production, um, movie watching probably slows down. I did name those ones, and that was maybe more during writing
Mm.
or casting, like when I'm getting ramping up in that realm. But that whole, I remember back to Spielberg, I remember seeing some documentary with him 25 years ago or something, and he talked about, before I make a movie, I always watch these five films, and it's Seven Samurai, It's a Wonderful Life, Lawrence of Arabia, I forget what else he names, but
Greatest show on
um,
earth.
what's
It's
that?
not really great show. He said that it's one of the first movies he ever saw, and it's funny. It's perception and history. I always found that funny, but
But yeah, I can't. I think kind of slowing down on the movie watching and getting your head in another place is
mm,
sometimes more helpful. But I've only made two movies, so it's not like I'm, uh,
old hat at it.
this is not a routine.
So how was the shoot? I was it for Better Angels?
Yeah, there are no interesting stories about it because it was all so perfect. The cast was so,
I thought I remember you telling me it went pretty smooth.
yeah, it was, there were no bumps. It was, we were just shooting this gorgeous location. The cast was so prepared and
How many days did you have?
happy. I think we shot for 23 days.
Okay, so kind of slightly more than an indie, but just barely. That you still got a lot of. I mean, it's so. I always find it just so Herculean that these movies are shot in 20-25 days. It's just
Oh yeah,
the scale
it's
shows.
it's crazy when you hear about an independent film that did have 40 days or 50 days, and you think, wow, that's that's lucky. Uh, the thing that was nice about this film was, you wake up in the hotel and then you get in the van and it's cold, and the van takes you all the way to set, and you're nervous the whole time, um, and everyone else is talking, and you're just sitting there nervous if you're the director. And what was fun was you'd wind your way into the woods, and then you'd see the cabin there, and you'd have to drive all the way up to it. And it was enclosed in this kind of bowl in the woods, uh, and then the lights would be on, and smoke would be coming out of the chimney. And so it wasn't like you had to get your mind into movie thinking because it was already so magical just arriving at set. Suddenly you were transported to Lincoln Land. And I remember it would be like you could start shooting more easily as opposed to shooting if you walk in and you have to shoot a bedroom scene and get your actors to that right emotional space and figure out how you're going to shoot a boring bedroom or something.
Do you remember your first day?
Yes, we did an MOS shoot, a no sound shoot,
Okay. Well,
and we did that because we had some swimming and some shirtless stuff and rolling around the mud or whatever. And we wanted to get that stuff done before the cold came. And so, like a week and a half before principal photography started, we shot this day of play.
was there anything ceremonious in your mind about it? Or was it just a matter of fact, just getting the stuff done?
I thought I would start ceremoniously. You think, oh, if you're called upon, I might say these few words or thank these specific people or let other people speak if there's. But I remember, yeah, everyone I think is just kind of itching to go and make sure they do their part, and you know everything goes according to plan. So I think it just started unceremoniously.
What was the post production process like on Better Angels? Terry wasn't around for it, right?
No, he wasn't around for anything.
Okay.
I don't even think he's seen the movie. But yeah, I think uh, I was so happy by the end of post production. Sorry, by the end of production, starting post production, with my friend Alex Milan, and we cut in San Antonio, and I would just start making my selects. He was doing kind of reorganization of those selects and starting to fix sound in them and order scenes, and the movie was nebulous in that way where it wasn't completely clear A B C D E where everything would go. There was some freedom in how the story could unfold, and so we had to figure that out. There were the giant beats of, well, his mother does die here. That's, can't change that. But around that, there's lots
Can't
of
change that.
problem solving of what felt right.
With being a talented editor, how involved are you? I mean, you mentioned selects, but I didn't know if you were having to do more shape, whether it was like a co-editing thing, because you're also used to a situation where you're used to collaborating very well with other editors, right? Which a lot of editors I find that anathema. Whereas you bounce ideas off with each other.
Yeah, I've heard of editors that don't. On the current job I'm on right now, they kept checking, going, "Are you okay working with a team?" And I'm going, "Of course, who isn't?" But so I guess it does. It's out there, people that don't like to work with teams. But um, yeah, I love to collaborate. I mean, I like to have my own station and sit right there and work on my own stuff. But I also like to walk into the other room and see what he or she's doing, and also hand it off to them, and they give me what they're working on. And I got it this far. Let's see what you do with it. I think I mean, that's more fun than anything, to see what someone else brings to the table and surprises you with. Uh, I don't think, I mean, that makes you happier than if you achieve it yourself.
The one thing I've always noticed about you in any room I've been working with you in film is you are one of and the reason I always thought you'd be a great director is you are one of the most encouraging people I've ever known.
Well, that's sure nice of you, Shane. I know it's funny to sit and talk like this on this recording because you and I have spent so many years in the submarine together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're asking questions that you know the answer
Yeah,
to.
and I'm milking friends for early guests. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you know what I learned from you is on the scene in Tree of Life. It's not in the movie, no fault of your own, but
sure.
that homeless man,
Oh man.
uh, and it was a difficult scene for um, uh, continuity and performance and the dialogue and uh, I mean it was a good. I mean the elements were there, but it's just one of those scenes that for some reason everyone had to edit a whole bunch. But I remember the one that was able to crack it was you, and it was through the strength of Sean Penn's reaction shots, but then also cutting on their glances. And that sounds like elementary editing, but I was 21 years old and hadn't really edited before, and I remember paying attention to cutting according to where they're looking. I don't mean in physical space, I mean emotionally.
Well,
Like,
true to
cutting
form,
off their
you
glances.
on your podcast you had to give sing me a compliment. So
Yeah,
that's
you better keep that in. Don't cut it out.
yeah. Well, so Better Angels goes to Sundance and it was in the Next Fest. How was that? What was that like?
It was in New Frontiers.
New Frontiers. Sorry, Next was years later or something.
uh, it was great. I loved it. It was wonderful, and crossing the finish line with the team was amazing, and everyone was happy.
Where'd you
It was
guys
a
mix?
happy time, I remember.
Where'd you guys
And
mix at?
we mixed. Uh, Joel Dougherty mixed it in Hell's Kitchen. I think it was like at a
Wow.
small Warner Brothers like annex studio. I don't know if it's still around.
Okay, and how what was the process after you went back to working with Terry after Better Angels, or was it the same process of
Yeah,
writing work during the
I
day,
just
write at night?
I entered the stream of Knight of Cups, and that went on for years. But yeah, it was exactly as you say, writing at night, reading a lot, and crafting Friday's Child. And I had this new producer that I had just met, Julio Quintana, who made The Vessel, said, "You got to meet this guy. Uh, he worked with me for a short period on The Vessel. You'll get along with him." And his name was Christian Sosa. And so I picked up with him trying to shape this new movie that I wanted to make. And he was kind enough to even take interest before there was a script or anything or cast. And so we were sort of just meeting over coffee any chance I could and trying to develop that film.
Do you you are also one of the most I mean I think any working director is this way, and a lot of people lose their soul over this, and you have it, but you're one of the most relentless people being upbeat about the myriad ways a film will fall apart. You always treat it like it's just an ever evolving, changing thing, like you were talking about earlier with the casting process. I mean, do you have any observations about way it feels now versus either maybe just when you first started getting into finance, or stories you know from people trying to get projects together maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
You're saying how's my perspective changed?
Yeah, or do you think it's easier or harder? I mean, I'm asking you a loaded question there, but
No, yeah, sure. I'd say it's harder. I think, the high that you feel of getting to make your first film is so intense and it feels so um, miraculous that that energy just drives you. And, I think as you make movie two, three, four, five, six, if you're lucky enough to, um, you might realize the peril around you more so that you maybe aren't as aware of with your first film. And that's the beauty of it is
like peril meaning what?
peril as in what can go wrong with a movie professionally, financially, the way that it's received, your own friendships, partnerships, everything. You don't realize that uh, there's so much to gain and lose in an instant based on every aspect of filmmaking. And I think when you start out, you're not as aware of that, and that's what leads to bold, daring, beautiful work. It's almost like you're someone that's dancing and you don't realize that 1,000 people are looking at you. Whereas I
That's a
think the
great
more
analogy.
movies you make, you become more self-conscious, or you become reactionary, or you maybe pull your punches, or you're doubling down on them in a stubborn way that is not serving serving the work. So
What were
there's good and bad.
what were the in between the two movies? What were the projects you edited on? Were they exclusively Terry movies?
I worked on a few things. First up, it was that Khalil Joseph Arcade Fire thing, which was
You mentioned that.
a happy time. It wasn't called the Reflector tapes at the time, but that's what it would become. He didn't know if it was going to be a music video, a making of, an art installation piece. It was so many different things, and we were cutting all these spots for it for the release of the band's album Reflector, along with what Khalil wanted. I just remember it being a very creative, brief time. But then, yeah, it was off to Night of Cups, song to song, editing those, and yeah, and then and though that went on for some time.
I wanted to ask you to reflect, based on what the reviews said at the time. How do you reflect on your influence from Terry now? I mean, it's a broad question for someone if you've worked for someone for so long, but
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of gratitude I feel toward him always. It's strange to talk about it objectively, as I'm sure it is for you or
sure.
Khalil or anyone in our circle, because we're all family friends. So it's sort of like at the Thanksgiving table going, "Hey, AJ, what do you think of what do you think of Uncle Tim over there?"
Well,
You know,
but at the same time,
uh,
the early review, and it's funny, you're not hearing a lot of it from the Age Out reviews, but the early reviews were really relentless about it. And I mean, I saw it, but I was also kind of annoyed by it. It just was one of those indictments of groupthink and modern criticism. And I didn't know if I mean, you're not.
I think that they have a hard job. There's
Yeah,
so much
sure.
coming that there's so much, as you know, you've written about film. I mean, there's so much coming at you, and your job is to put it through the easiest lens possible and make what you're writing appealing to a person who is probably clicking through seven things in 60 seconds. And so I think, um, clickbaity, flashy titles and name drops and sort of compartmentalizing and disregarding is a lot easier way to write about something than it is to fully wrestle with it. Even if you're wrestling with it because of its weaknesses or because of its strengths, I think it's better to wrestle with something more and meet it more on its own terms than to
Your frame of reference for it.
yeah, just to just quickly uh come up with, whatever quick referencing or other things you can. I'm rambling here because what I'm realizing is someone could easily say, a critic could go, "You're calling me referential? You're the one that's being referential. You leave us no choice but to mention references." So
Well,
everything that
then
I
it's just a
say could
shouting
be,
match. It's a pointing fingers, and yeah, then
yeah.
who wins at that? Except,
But I think that you know, there are, if you're influenced by Ron Howard or Robert Zemeckis, I think that that influence is less visible than if you're inspired by some other folks, that where that inspiration may reveal itself more easily.
well,
Um,
you always had the best quote about because we used to trade ridiculous Terrence Malick comparisons, and I mean my favorite one to this day was someone compared a baseball game to a Terrence Malick film, and it's like, oh, are you just you want to find a fancier way to say slow, and
yeah, well, the term has become shorthand and culturally that's quickly digested, like the way Kafkaesque is now said by people that maybe haven't read Kafka, but it within the lexicon, like we all immediately know what that means. Or um, what's another one that'd be like that?
Spielbergian.
Poe. Like I don't know if you say
Oh,
Poean, but like
right,
Poe is now immediately linked with the macabre. Yeah, Spielbergian would immediately be shorthand for
Wonderment.
entertaining and also I don't know, childlike, sappy. I have no idea, but we all know what it means.
Well,
Um,
the best definition I heard specifically to the Terrence Malick one was you said that it's poetic and it has stars in it.
uh,
Do you remember saying that?
you're saying I said that in I was being negative, right?
Yeah. Well, when
Yeah, like people are.
talking about lazy comparisons or just the
Yeah,
lazy usage of the.
yeah, because I think, and there's also, sometimes you can be compared to folks, and it's a good thing. It's positive, if you're, there are people that you can be compared to, and it'll help you, and then there are people that it can hurt you, and so I think you don't want to go around thinking about it too much or looking in the mirror and questioning yourself all day. But I think that,
Be pretty still defined to do that.
well, I think so. I mean, listen to it, learn from it, but also I think you can push back a little bit. There are, not only push back in the work, but push back in your own psychology or in any of these situations that you get in where maybe someone is confrontational about it and trying to demean you or put you in your corner to shut you up. as a filmmaker it happens, or as an actor or anything, when you put yourself out there, that can happen
Put yourself out there.
publicly.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so you
always.
just got to make sure that you're controlling the story of your film a little bit, especially if they're trying to run away with the story, and it's like they're trying to steal it from you. And then I remember my wife was robbed once, and they drove away with her purse, and they were throwing the stuff out of her purse as they were driving away, the stuff that they didn't want. And that image just came to my mind of that's sort of what can happen to your movie, where it's like, before you know it, they're driving away with it, and they've ripped it apart, and they're throwing it, and then all of a sudden all that's left is the fragments of what they rejected or what they accepted, and maybe what they accepted's now gone, or you just have to find your own purpose and meaning in what you're trying to do, and then be satisfied with that. Because if you're just looking for them to
Well, I
give
wish.
you the satisfaction of their compliments, that's going to be few and far between.
Yeah, I was gonna say the other recurring thing with you always is you're always one of the long view people. So you would always, if I come in and tell you about what film Twitter was saying about the raving about this movie, you'd always be the one that'd be very politely, with a smile, skeptical. You'd be, or not even skeptical. You'd just be more like, huh, I hope it's as good when I see it.
I don't remember that, but that's funny. Yeah, I mean, I think it's
It would be silly to obviously to wait for what critics think, or
yeah, and I think
or
it's always fun. You and I
rely
have
or
talked
make
about
it
this
for that.
before. Like if you look at, I'm gonna sound defensive when I say this. I don't mean to be, but Hitchcock didn't make a good movie until he was 10 movies in, or Ozu didn't make a good movie until he was 8 movies in. Kurosawa also took a long time to hit his stride. Um, D.W. Griffith, John Ford, uh, they worked very strangely and were stumbling along until suddenly they hit their stride and became what we know them today. I'm not saying that that's
No, I
relevant to any of this, but I'm saying for anyone that's listening, it can be inspiring in any arena of creativity to think how long you sometimes have to work at it to make it click, or at least click with others if it hasn't been.
well, jumping to Age Out. You're feeling pretty strongly about Age Out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of the film. It's been such a long process. I feel sort of distant from it, but I'm so glad it's finally out there. Yeah.
What were the movies going into that? Because I remember the first thing I told you when I saw it was I compared it, or it was like a mix, or it wasn't a mix, but I remember thinking of The Conversation and Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, the thing that's similar to the conversation is the spareness of like the way that he lives, and then also that the saxophone score. And I remember hearing Coppola, I think it was on the commentary, talk about how the saxophone's the instrument that's closest to the human voice, and he thought that there would be loneliness in that would kind of haunt the Harry character in the conversation.
Harry Line.
And I think also Taxi Driver has
Right.
that's a that's a trumpet score.
Right, I'm wrong.
No, it has saxophone.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
It's saxophone. It's because
it's
he
okay.
plays that, and
So I think that I just love Colin, and that also works out in that tradition of scoring. So for sure the conversation, and then that Dustin Hoffman movie Straight Time. I
mm,
love that picture. It's kind of underseen, but it parallels this in terms of its structure and the character. The guy that fresh out of jail is now on probation. He then uh, gets pulled back into petty crime, flies out of his probation, is on the run again.
you know what I just saw just a few weeks ago was his I forget the guy's name, is Ula Grossart or something.
Exactly.
His movie he did after that. It's got De Niro and Robert
Oh, True
Duvall.
Confessions.
Yeah, have you seen it? Do you remember it?
Yeah, with Duvall.
Yeah, I just saw that recently, and
What'd you
like
think?
I think it was just bland, but not by its own fault. It was more just that James Ellroy comes along a few years later and sensationalizes Black Dahlia, so everything after before then seems pretty really tame, and then just some of the Catholic Church plot and stuff like that is also unfortunately been relegated to tameness. But it was bizarre, just going through the filmography, being excited about a Duvall De Niro collaboration, and then coming across something kind of bland.
Yeah, it's a movie that I return to like every 5 years, curious if what I'll think of it by going back to it. But you're right that it never has floored me the way that Straight Time has.
Yeah. But what are some other movies
Oh,
for?
then it'd be, I'm sure, you got to mention Gus Van Sant. So,
How did you guys?
Malanoche, My Own Private Idaho.
How did you guys hook up?
It was just through writing him a letter, and during post-production, I just told him how much I admired him, and he was kind enough to take a look at the movie.
Did he give notes?
He did. He was it, but it actually reveals something about the end of the movie. So,
Oh, interesting.
but he had a question of things should be the movie's a little non-linear, and he was wondering if it should be made linear, but then he had the comment to his own notes saying, "I'm sure you've already thought of this, and maybe in fact it was written that way, but that's just what." And he was right that the movie, as written and shot, was completely linear. And then there were in editing, we decided to withhold certain scenes and punt them to the end, and that's what he was questioning.
So what's your day to day right now? You're on an editing job right now, and then you're writing at night.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a fun new thing in life. The last 2 or 3 years is writing now for others. I mean, getting jobs in that way. That's new.
What's it been like?
I love it. I love writing. I could do it every day, all day. It's just,
But writing for others.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's with the hope of the job will be your own, but
Does it just get you outside your own head, or what?
it does that, and it also, I mean, it makes you wrestle with genres that you might not be working with, and characters that probably wouldn't pop out of your own head naturally. It like, I remember reading that Godard biography by Brody, and he talked about, people would come to him with money and an idea, and they would want, they'd be like, "Oh, it's a detective story, and we're going to shoot it in this city," and he'd go, "Okay, great," and so he would always wrap these projects to fit his own idiosyncrasies, but it was
Yeah.
getting him into stories, worlds, and characters that he otherwise would not have collided with.
So,
Um, yeah,
well, what's the is there any particular project that's catching fire right now? And I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine too.
it's silly to say that you don't want to talk. I mean that feels corny to say it, but
No, it makes
yeah,
total sense.
there's some adaptations, literary adaptations, um, and then some original projects as well, and they're all in different states of having cast attached or this, that, and the other. So our old saying, which is they're all on the runway, just got to see which one takes off first.
Actually, that saying doesn't come to mind right now.
Oh, good. Okay.
That's an AJ original as far as I'm concerned. Well, AJ Edwards, I think that's it. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
This was such a blast, Shane. I'm so excited for this and for you, and I can't wait to hear all your other ones. But thank you for this sincerely. This was so fun.